friends. Welcome to episode 249 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
Rob, are you thirsty?
I actually am, and I'm going to pour some tea here in a second. It is February. It is our first system spotlight. I am not even going to get into how both of us are doing right now. I would like to get into the meat and potatoes of this as quickly as possible because there's a lot that we've talked about with this.
There's a lot going on, yeah. So we're doing a system spotlight tonight on Thirsty Sword Lesbians by Evil Hat Games.
Yes.
And this is a bit of a wild ride.
Yeah. I'm going to premise this whole thing with kind of what I wrapped up with talking to you before we started the show, and that is I'm a narrative person. I love narrative games. I love how systems have moved to that. The whole Powered by the Apocalypse kind of helped drive that further down the lane. And I like dramatic, heroic stories, and this kind of pushes that as well.
Sure.
I mean, and all of that being said, I'm kind of intimidated at the idea of running this. And almost to the level of I don't think I could comfortably do it justice or without making a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. So the good news about our particular duo is that I am not one but two letters of LGBT. So,
yes.
So I'm extra queer. So I can give you the queer perspective on a game like Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which is designed for and by queer people to tell queer stories.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I can absolutely understand the perspective of looking at a game like that from a cishet, person, and just going like, I don't know if this game is for me. And I think the true answer is I don't know if it is.
Yeah. I'll get into some of the other details that we had talked about as we move into the other sections of this. But I want people to have an understanding of my perspective on this. Is that I am giving it a thorough review. There's nothing. I have no negative feelings about this.
Yeah, sure.
As far as the system, the way the book is written, honestly, it's beautiful. Or anything that it supports. There's so much of this that is so good. But at the same time, it's the creation and the telling of the story that I would find daunting.
Yeah. I mean, I think, when we were talking earlier, the example I used was like, BET, Black Entertainment Television. And, like, you and I are both, like, white suburbanites, you know? And whereas none of BET's advertising or anything like that says, white people are not welcome here. Nothing's stopping you from turning on that channel and watching shows about the lives of black people. There's a certain realization that we are not the target audience for BET, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fine. We are not the target audience, and not everything is made for us.
Correct.
That's perfectly fine that something wouldn't be made for us. And I think this is kind of falls into the exact same category. Why someone like yourself would pick up Thirsty Sword Lesbians and feel intimidated by it, not really quite know how to approach it, feel like you would need to walk on eggshells while running it because you understand the sensitivity of the nature of some of the subject matter and such like that. And I think it's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to realize that this game is not for you.
Yeah, I will say one thing that the book is 100% lacking, and I don't necessarily feel that it needs it. It's not a requirement.
Sure.
Because I'm a cis white guy, I don't need a section to teach me. I don't need you guys to write me a section of how I can play gay or lesbian characters. But that is not in here. This is not like Shang-Chi Blood in the Banquet Hall where it explains to you, hey, you're doing a cultural thing. Here are some guidelines and focus points.
Yeah, there's no attempt at cultural exchange.
Right. It's not this book is not a learning process.
Right.
It knows what it is. It is moving it is moving into it and showing you some tools to be able to explore this if you're already involved. So, that being said,
yeah, sure.
There's all your warnings at the beginning of this. Now we move in.
I don't know if they're warnings. They're more just commentary on where it sits culturally,
and
our
direction on our thoughts and opinions.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So right off the bat, let's just get this out of the way. April Kit Walsh is the attorney who kind of started this, and actually I think was the primary writer. April is trans and actually has a section in the book that kind of is a little bit of a outpouring. I think it was well written.
Sure.
But they're an attorney for Electronic Frontier Foundation, and it kind of started development back in 2017, and it was very slow. Mostly just because there was a lot of processing of how they wanted to do it, and like poking and stuff, like all good game development. Kanisha Bryant is the illustrator on it, it's gorgeous. The illustrations are wonderful. I highly recommend if you look at the cover and you like the art, the book is buried with it. It is great. In October 2020, Evil Hat Productions picked up the Kickstarter. It closed on November 12th at 298,000 with only 8,000 backers, which was 15 times its goal.
That's
because they didn't.
Right,
I mean, especially for something that they did not expect to be a small publishing. Because it was very niche.
Sure.
Evil Hat was like, we're going to have to delay the publishing on this because we've got to come up with stretch goals. 15 stretch goals. Kind of a thing. And instead, they basically just ramped up production, and the core book was received 5 months ahead of schedule.
I think that's great.
Right. They then went on to do a bunch of other stuff, too, but I think that right there was telling of where Evil Hat sat with the publication of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the support. It's been released with bundles of other things.
On itch.io, which is where actually I picked it up.
Right,
That's where I got it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is Evil Hat supports all kinds of locations for us. You can get it on DriveThruRPG, you can get it at itch.io. All of those are ways that they're also funding charitable donations. In fact, one where they support Trans Right in Texas.
I think that's the bundle I picked up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then support for the Ukrainians. There's another one out there for that. Funny enough, or not funny enough, but in addition, in November 2021, Evil Hat then kickstarted the first expansion, which was Advanced Lovers and Lesbians, which choice names on all of these.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it adds additional character playbooks and 21 new settings. And there's a few settings already in this book.
There's like 6 or 7 already,
which are
I think.
Pretty solid settings.
Yeah,
so I'm intrigued that there's 21 additional ones out there.
Yeah.
Normally we talk about the setting and feel, and I will flat out say I'm avoiding that section. And the reason being is because this game is not set in one setting. This is a mechanical set of rules, effectively.
Yeah.
It is just a core rule set to be run in any setting. And I do mean
very genre agnostic.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like it says it's Thirsty Sword Lesbians with a sword in there, but the truth of the matter is that you don't necessarily have to follow fantasy. In fact, the rules don't force it.
Yeah, in fact, there's several core settings in here that they suggest that are like there's like a cyberpunk one and like a coffee house AU one. From the settings section in the book, it says, take the premise of any story with swords and run it with Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and you'll get a slash-fic style version of the original, meaning more melodrama, more kissing, and more queerness. If you've ever shouted at a show, "Make it gay, you cowards!" this game is here to help. Are you a fan of samurai dramas, Highlander, wuxia novels and films, Arthurian legend, lightsaber duels? Any of these can be touchstones for a game of Thirsty Sword Lesbians.
But at the same time, you can run mystery.
Yeah.
You can run intrigue. You can run spy. All of that still fits within the rule system. 100%. Without question. Like, without even adjustment.
Yeah.
So it's the beauty of where this game can go. That being said, let's get into the mechanics.
Sure.
Let's tear down, because again, it's powered by the apocalypse. Enjoy.
Yeah, you guys have heard the old powered by the apocalypse spiel a good number of times if you're a long listener of this show. So we have our core resolution mechanic is 2d6 plus an attribute. and we're going to be trying to get as high on that as possible. If it's a 10 higher, you have what's called an upbeat. That's success without consequence, or maybe it's got an extra opportunity tacked onto it. 7 to 9 is what's going to be called a mixed beat. That's going to be success with consequences or with risk, or maybe you just didn't achieve all of what you were looking for. And 6 and lower, you're going to have a downbeat, which is not always a failure, but an extra complication or an unexpected outcome might come out of that.
Right.
You also mark experience if you have a downbeat.
Yeah, I like that generally within the Powered by the Apocalypse set. I think it plays actually better in this.
Yeah, agreed.
Because consequences are great. Sometimes you really want consequences, and you actually lean into it. You may choose to have a downbeat.
Absolutely.
I like the stats. I think the stats are kind of cool. Daring, which is your arms and skill at arms and force moves, your muscle, and you're in both muscle and personality. So whether you're being forceful, I would say like taunting is a great example of that.
Yes.
Grace is your elegance, poise, and agility. I think that actually defines that better than dexterity by any means.
Sure.
Heart, your emotional intelligence, whereas wit is your cleverness and knowledge. And then finally spirit, which is your metaphysical powers and your integrity, which I think is great that they use integrity. It pulls, all of these kind of pull me back to 7th C and its choices for stats in the same way. So
yeah, it does kind of already speak to sort of that heroic sort of feel that it's going for here.
Yep.
Now we've got a section we call emotional damage. Because in this game there are no hit points, there are just conditions, and none of those conditions are even physical. You've got angry, frightened, guilty, hopeless, and insecure. Reminded me a lot of Mouse Guard, actually.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Where you screw something up, you might come away from it angry or tired or sick or something like that.
Right.
So these are all negative emotional states.
Yes.
Now, each condition places a -2 penalty on a common move. For instance, if you are angry, you are -2 to figure someone out. You're not thinking straight. Ba-dum-tish.
Yes.
Et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you ever have all 5 conditions and would take a 6th, you are knocked out of the scene in whatever way is appropriate narratively. You're either physically incapacitated, or you run away, or whatever.
Right.
Excuse me. Clearing these conditions can be done with the emotional support move, which has more applications than just clearing conditions.
Right.
But I would say that's the primary way of doing that. And that's essentially another character coming to you and talking about you with your feelings, what caused them, what do you need to happen, and working you through it, giving you a little friend-to-friend therapy, you know?
Yep.
Now, each condition also can be cleared by doing a destructive act that is specific to it. I.e., if you are angry, you can clear it by breaking something that is valuable to you.
Yep.
And just working it out the good old-fashioned way. Scream into a pillow.
But the key is it has to have value.
It has to have value, exactly.
It has a result that has an impact. Yep.
And I would say most conflicts also should end with de-escalation, seduction, or discovery of a new twist. It would be rare that you would defeat a foe or be defeated by taking all of your conditions and being totaled out. But you can do it. And NPCs in particular may actually fold after one condition. Some of them who are particularly mean or intent or willful may take all 5.
Yeah, and once we get into the DM section, there are sometimes results from getting a condition, a response, if you will.
Yep.
So, which makes sense as we start getting into it.
So then we go to strings.
It's kind of the heart. In a major component to the system.
I would say this is probably like the core. I would say it's a unique mechanic because Monster Hearts actually uses the same system.
I feel that it is a key currency.
Yes,
and I'm gonna say currency.
It is, and it's intrinsic as things like bennies to Savage Worlds or drama dice to 7th C, fate tokens to Fate. Inspiration to D&D. Strings are going to be what you're accumulating in this game. Those represent influence over a person, either by an emotional bond, i.e. they're a friend of yours, possibly a lover of yours, or someone maybe you have like a negative influence over, like blackmail. But one way or another, though, a string is that ability to kind of tug on their heartstring. That's where they've got the word from. To basically say, hey, come on, it's me. You want to do this. And for better or for worse, they do. GMs also get string. The gay master.
Yes.
Also gets a one string per player that they can use for their NPCs to do things. And basically, a string can just be expended to influence the decisions of that particular character. You don't even have to roll if you spend a string. And so that's kind of really good. Like it is you're calling in a marker basically. If you ever get 4 strings on someone, you can expend them all to get +2 XP and learn something vital about them. So you still advance your intimacy with that person, but you do kind of reset the clock on top of all that. And these are all kind of tied into another move that's very intrinsic to the gameplay, and that is influence with a string. Does exactly what it says on the tin. You spend a string, you do one of the following. Offer XP to do something. Don't spend the string if they refuse. Find out what it'll take for them to do what you want. Add 1 to a roll against them after rolling. Or add or subtract 1 from a roll they made after they roll. So you could hinder or help someone with strings. They're pretty powerful altogether.
Yeah, and a lot of times I would say in a narrative explanation, strings often should be looked at like the quips during a fight. Like, you may think you're doing well and in defending yourself, and then the person makes a comment and you slip up in your action. That's them basically increasing the difficulty or getting one up on you, kind of a thing. Likewise, spending a string might be them forcing you to become angry. And influencing that you now are no longer the calm samurai who's fighting them with like almost a cold edge of, you guys just suck at this. And I'm thinking of Blue-Eyed Samurai. To the, oh, you're just a demon. And then it's, here's your string. Show me how much of a demon you really are. You're angry. I don't want to be angry. What'll it take to make you angry? Call me a demon one more time. Second string comes out. Demon. And that's the thing, is that you're pushing that envelope. Right, to get a response. That's where strings kind of sit in this.
And of course, you've got other moves that are kind of in that common pool. Smitten is a self-declared move that signals your intent for kind of emotional entanglement with another character. This is basically to create drama and interaction. Okay? I mean, the game operates under the understanding that you want to get into, fanfic levels of melodrama with the other characters in the story.
Sarah, are we supposed to get involved?
Yes.
How involved?
Very, very involved.
Yes, so that's right where we're sitting with this.
If when you declare yourself smitten, it kind of opens yourself up to a lot of other like emotional entanglements and stuff like that. And again, it's a voluntary move. Finally kiss in a dangerous situation. I absolutely adore this move.
The first one that I actually thought of was True Lies.
I could see it.
When he's defending his wife after they get caught by the terrorist. And like he kisses her and then immediately just starts wiping people out. Like, kind of a thing. Like it's clearly that moment ends with the kiss, right? And sets the thing in motion. But I love it. I love that it is there to basically give a chance for survival. You know, that you're going to make it through this kind of a thing. But
it requires some smoochies.
It does. An emotional connection. You know?
We were watching Farscape last night. It's the first time I've ever watched Farscape. And, two of the main characters in a tight situation. Oxygen's running low. Shuttlecraft is stranded. And just as the big thing happened, of course, she leans in and just smooches him.
Yep.
And they had that awkward moment afterwards where they're like, we're not going to talk about this, are we? That never happened. Heat of the moment and all that jazz. The oxygen was low. Yeah, that's why it happened.
Luke and Leia, for luck.
Yeah, that one got awkward.
Did it?
Well, it got awkward because in Empire Strikes Back, she full-on smooches him right in front of Han Solo to make him jealous.
Again, I don't think that's outside of the context of what this game tries to promote.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's not a kiss for... The kiss for luck was clearly the kiss before a dangerous situation. The other one, on the other hand, was a move. Without a doubt, to set something in motion, to create drama.
I just don't know if pulling out the sibling pair is really what you want to talk about. The good examples of kisses.
Again, I'm trying to set the... again, they didn't know. Those players didn't know their characters were brother and sister. That's a whole nother dramatic level that was created later.
That's true. That's true.
So...
but then also there's the emotional support move, and I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about recovering from conditions, but it's also kind of to deepen those emotional moments, especially with those who are smitten. It is an invitation to engage on an emotional level with another character.
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of really what the core of this whole game is about.
This one. In a not romantic, yet still very emotionally charged moment, Hawkeye, where he whistles the secret whistle to have her sister stop trying to kill him. Because it ends her anger right there. It stops it and opens it into an emotional discussion of how do you know that?
Yeah.
And that right there, that is emotional support in a different way.
Yeah, sure.
But it collapses the moment back to a dramatic moment of you had a connection with her too, and I don't know how to handle that now. So I can see good examples out there in media in various places.
Oh, absolutely.
That are not necessarily thirsty or lesbian.
All of these things are very tropey. And I think anybody who relishes in melodrama, especially anybody who's ever read fan fiction of anything, like immediately recognizes a lot of these tropes, and they're just fun. It's fun to lean into these tropes sometimes. You know, I for some stupid reason tropes have gotten a bad name.
Nothing wrong with them.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with them, and it's super fun to just be campy about them sometimes.
Helps with the detachment from reality. Let's just say that. Playbooks. One of the greatest things about character creation in Powered by the Apocalypse is the ease.
Absolutely.
This
Pull
game
out a playbook with a highlighter and a pen
does the same thing for you, and I love it. I love also how they classified these simply. I mean, you can read these by name and know what it is, and I think that's one of the keys to Powered by the Apocalypse that has always been good in some of the best designs is when you read a playbook's name, you already have a feeling of what you're getting into.
Not only that, but one of the things that Thirsty Sword Lesbians does very well is it immediately engages with what the drama of playing that playbook is.
Exactly.
Okay. Right in the opening section, it gives a brief description of what it is, and it finishes by saying the conflict here is living their truth versus fitting in with the dominant social order.
The Beast.
Yes. The Chosen. Inner truth versus crushing social expectations. You know? And then you go on and at the end of each playbook, there is like a 2 or 3 paragraph section talking about how to play that playbook, what sort of stories you should expect if you do engage with that playbook, and what you should bring to the table to add to the melodrama. You know? There is, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them in the main book. We've got the Beast, like we said, the Chosen, the Devoted, which is devotion versus self-care. It's kind of like a paladin sort of character. The Infamous. The Infamous is, if anybody watched She-Ra and the Princess of Power, this would be like Catra in the later seasons. Past actions and beliefs versus new convictions of the redeemed villain.
I mean, you could also say the same thing about Jesus, I've lost
Hordak.
I've lost it. Avatar.
Zuko.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Zuko's in Infamous, yes.
Very much in Infamous.
The Nature Witch. New to socializing, more connected with nature than people, I suppose. You could get kind of that Babe in the Woods sort of character.
Yeah.
The Scoundrel. Urge to explore new horizons versus committing to purpose of security. This is a Han Solo style character.
Yeah, very much so.
The dashing rogue that doesn't want to be tied down, but finds themselves entangled with people they care about anyways.
Yeah.
The Seeker is a weird one that I don't know that the name of the playbook really does it much justice. This is someone who comes from a toxic background that is basically trying to learn how to be their own person.
Well, I mean, think seeking is all they do.
Sure.
So
the Seeker is Seeker's major conflict is tradition and upbringing versus justice and developing themselves, i.e., trying to figure out who they are and separate it from their toxic background.
Yep.
The Spooky Witch, pressure to conform versus their own desires of those or their monstrous friends.
I'm going to go back to Seeker for a second for a reference
Sure.
point. Not Lucius Malfoy, but Draco. I think there's a certain element of that in there.
No.
Because his past is toxic.
I don't think he ever gets past it, though. That's the thing.
At the very... Again, we're doing movies versus books. There's a whole something to be said there. But I would say at the end...
Yeah, fair enough.
He makes a lot of advancement in the very last few parts of the story. But again, he's going from a very toxic opening of what he is meant to do, tradition and upbringing, versus am I a baddie?
Right.
How do I resolve this with what I can do now without losing my family? You know, I think that's very much a Seeker.
Sure.
So Spooky Witch.
And then lastly, you've got the Trickster.
Yes.
Desiring closeness while fearing vulnerability.
Yes.
How do you stay alone and aloof, but also open yourself up to...
Now, this is where I'm going to step in for just a second, because I feel that this is important. At the opening onset of this today, I had sent a little blurb to Sarah. And I think after going through all the playbooks, I want to be able to say this. This is actually before the foreword of the book. This is like in the, hey, this is Creative Commons. You can copy and paste. In fact, just before this actual paragraph, there's a section that says, if you work at a copy center, consider this consent on us allowing you to let the people make photocopies.
Sure.
And then it says this. This is a game where people make up stories about wonderful, terrible, impossible, glorious things. All the characters and events portrayed in this work are fiction and worth celebrating. Any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental or is possibly a Mary Sue self-inserting character. If you feel called out by the playbooks, that's between you and your therapist.
Yes!
So I'm putting that out there. If anything we just read made you go...
Oh, God, that's me.
Oh, God, that's me.
Oh, that's
the book
my
will
playbook.
call you out.
Yeah.
Good luck with your therapy this week.
Yep.
That's where I'm going to leave that one.
Maybe you should play one.
Yeah.
Or maybe you shouldn't.
Yeah. There is that. So, advancement.
Advancement's pretty standard. Powered by the Apocalypse. You're an XP. You get to a certain XP threshold. You check something new on your playbook. You check enough stuff on your playbook. Maybe you retire your character. You get a happily ever after.
I'm going to get to that. I love it.
Sure.
Settings. We kind of talked about this. There's a lot of options that they give you in here, which is nice. They start, I think, there's 5 core ones that they put in here. There's the Star-Crossed Galaxy, which is kind of space opera. There's the Lesbian Coffee House.
Les Beans
Coffee House.
Yes.
Which is basically just a coffee shop. What swords are in a coffee shop?
Right, and the major conflict is basically against gentrification and stuff like that. So,
which makes sense. Neon City 2099. If you can't guess it, Cyberpunk by the name, don't go into it.
Yep.
The 3 Orders of
Ardor? Yeah.
Yes.
This one was weird. It's like sex workers as holy warriors.
First off, I know that anime. Second off, I will not be discussing it.
Right.
And the last one is their steampunk, and I love it, pulp warrior poets. And it's what is it? Les violets dangereuses.
Les violets dangereuses.
I was close. Never studied French.
Yes.
But I think that's fantastic. Warrior Poets is great. Okay. There is a Game Master section. But before I get into heavy details, I will set some things, 4 points in here, and that is, this game is not about sex, but it is quite thirsty. You have to understand that stepping into this, that the point of this is drama, and that drama literally resting on the knife edge of desire. Mm-hmm. And that desire is not necessarily always about kissing. It's the cutting edge between anger and frustration and longing and need.
Yeah. It's a deeply emotional game.
Yes.
And it's about emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
Which sometimes is paired with physical intimacy.
Yeah. Something that is not common in games that don't even grace narrative. That is not a discussion topic. So understand that you're going, if you went from D&D to this, it's more than just going from nighttime to daytime. It's going to be very, very different. Mm-hmm. If you don't have to be gay or bi or any other letter of the LGBTQ plus landscape to interact with this game and enjoy it. But you do have to know what you're getting into and be respectful at the table.
Yes, agreed.
Without, it's just a duh, okay? Straight up. If you change your heart or step away. Mm-hmm. That's literally your two options there.
Yep.
Number 3, this game is exceptionally clear about what it accepts, and this should be law at the table, without a doubt. Or, honestly, really any table. Unless you're specifically telling a story to address it. And I like this section. Yeah. That they literally open the section with no fascists or bigots allowed. Basically, it comes down to respect. Respecting everyone. Respecting all of their styles, both physically, emotionally, sexually, attraction, baggage, culture. Mm-hmm. Just accept it. Yeah. Just be respectful.
Everyone is different. Everyone has their own story to tell, right. And everyone is just as valid as you are.
And lastly, don't demand that anyone educate you about their marginalizations. Mm-hmm. That is not what this game is about. This isn't about you having them explain themselves and define it.
Right.
That you don't need to do that. And lastly, say yes as much as you can, even if it includes a but in there. Yes, but is a thing. No is acceptable because you don't want your PCs to treat NPCs as dolls that they can just control at willy-nilly. Mm-hmm. They are people. Yeah. They are just as emotionally connected. And consent happens for everyone, PC and NPC alike.
Yes.
So if it is not asked or accepted, that's a no.
Mm-hmm. So no is a complete sentence.
It doesn't mean that they can just drop down a string and say, I'm gonna just kiss them outright. Mm-hmm. No, that would never happen with this person.
Right.
It's just that's not happening. Mm-hmm. You can do that. That is 100% acceptable. That being said, they do have a lovely section here on the safety tools. They lean hard into Keena Shaw and Lauren Bryant Monk's TTRPG Safety Toolkit, which I highly recommend. If you've never looked at it, go look at it. But they also include some direct references, like the palette. Okay, so when you're in a session 0, the palette of concepts that you want to include, so think of it like a paintbrush palette, and that you don't want to include. This isn't just lines and veils, right? This is what all games should be doing in their session 0 of I don't want to include anyone under the age of 20. Yeah. Okay, great. That's part of the palette. At the same time, you can say anything that involves physical intimacy, regardless of who it's between. Can we just veil that? Mm-hmm. Great. These can change as the story goes on and even be acceptable with scenes, but it needs to be understood when that's coming around, that communication.
Sure.
This is where the check card comes in, and I like the idea of the check card over just an X card. All the check card, does is sit on the table. It is a simple check that sits on the table that if someone seems uncomfortable or that the subject matter is starting to stray to a sensitive topic, or even it's been a long time since anyone has had a break, someone can literally put their finger on the check, and it's a soft pause of like, we're just checking it.
Mm-hmm.
It's often a good idea for storytellers to put their finger on the check and say, hey guys, this next scene is going to grace close to one of our palette points.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we accepted this, and you guys are all good with this thing, but I want to let you know that this next scene is going to have some intensity.
Sure.
And then you take your finger off the check and you keep rolling.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of like a pause button. That's all it is. It's not as hard as the X card, which they do include, to understand when something is hit a line or a veil or a condition. So the idea is that you, stepping into the X card, it's not just necessarily a hard stop, but having the understanding of just a simple communication of like, my line is that I don't want any anti-trans bigotry within the story. Great. The veil is that anti-trans bigotry can be a feature of the patriarchal society in the setting, but I don't want to deal with it. I don't want it to come up in the story other than to be part of the framework that we all understand is going on the outside. And the condition is, I'm okay with having trans bigotry depicted as long as the bigotry is clearly in a villainous state and as long as it's not allowed to win.
Yeah.
Like, those are very good, clean understandings of how you can step through a line, a veil, or a condition where an X card is a good example of stepping in. And then that's just because maybe it didn't come up within the palette of understanding at the beginning of the game, and that's why it's flexible.
Yep, exactly.
All right, let's step into some principles.
Sure.
So, basic principles of the game are really well outlined. There's actually a bunch of them, but I like that they help you with this stepping through. For be excited about your PCs and the stories. This is kind of a normal thing for any...
Yeah, be a fan of your players.
Things.
It's pretty much printed on the cover of every PbtA book.
Pretty much. Make the world action-packed and perilous.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of brings us back to that drama, is that the world is dramatic, and that is what is driving stress into the story.
Yep.
But it is not the action of the story. That's the key here, is that there may be peril at the corners of at every corner, but it isn't what the story is about. It is just driving. It is the flow of the river.
Right.
It's the rocks that are going to hurt you, and that's the thing. Is that that's where adversaries can be appealing.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, they might poke at your PC's existing emotional conflicts, or an adversary who represents one prong of the PC's central emotional dilemma is going to be exceptionally powerful.
Yeah.
And those are the rocks within the current. So you might be having an alien invasion going on, but that's not what that's not what the story is.
Right.
The story is about you and the and your command staff at the superheroes place dealing with your inner conflicts about control and leadership, versus the world falling apart and these are all who's left to hold on to.
Right. I always think back to like stuff like Independence Day.
Yeah.
Is it a movie about an alien invasion, or is it a movie about a scientist reconnecting with his estranged father and his Jewish faith?
Yeah. That's a great point. Lost in Space.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it a story about a family trying to get home? Or is it a story about a family possibly losing each other?
Right.
In a strange...
And coming closer together through that adversary.
Exactly. Marvel as a whole is really an emotional ride. Mm-hmm. If you look at all of the stuff all together, the story is not about the components of what's going on.
Sure.
Those are kind of BS.
Sure.
It's never... Good comics never have been. Mm-hmm. I dare say, like, anybody who's read any of the more recent Batman and Catwoman stuff... You get my drift.
Any queer person who ever interacted with X-Men whatsoever.
True.
Sure, it's about mutant powers. Sure, guys.
Sure. Likewise, if you're following any of the Harley story, current live action comic, that is not about the misadventures of a villain.
Perhaps not.
So, create a space for PCs to feel their feelings. Mm-hmm. This is where things get different. It's not so much making it a necessarily a safe space. It's about having them have complex feelings within that space. And ask questions of like, when something happens, how does this make you feel? And if they have a response, it might warrant a condition. And that's really the key there, is that you're pushing the envelope. You're picking at the scab that is there.
Yeah.
Right? Until it comes off, and then you're like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, you're going to need a Band-Aid for that, because that's going to hurt."
Uh-huh.
And that's the key to that right there.
Yeah, it's called poking the hornet's nest.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is emotional manipulation 101, honestly. I think
is.
Even if you take nothing away from Thirsty Sword Lesbians, this is a great technique to learn.
Yeah.
This is me putting a dude you haven't seen since the first session of our game in a pub next to a bandit that you had forgotten about after you tortured him for information, sharing a beer, looking you in the eye and calling you killer.
Yep. You didn't have to pull a string.
I didn't have to pull a string on that one.
No,
right.
It was there.
That was just me going, how do I get the point across that this is the theme?
Yes. So, and back to the real point, which is make the story vivid and personal, right? So, in a fight, the game asks the character relationships will change, not who's better at swinging the sword. Mm-hmm. In investigation, the questions are about who's involved and their motivations, and who's using the situation to their advantage. It's not the investigation. It's everything that's emotionally wrapped around it.
Yep.
And I think you used to see that in a lot of the investigative cop dramas. It was about why they did it, not the act.
Uh-huh.
The act was easy to figure out.
The act was just the inciting incident. Everything else was the interesting part.
Right, and that's what comes out of this.
Yep.
So you're tailoring to the PC's emotional conflicts and relationships. But that is the hardest part of this game as a storyteller, right? They do make some notes. They suggest that you do this, that when your PCs are making their characters, you're basically watching them write their personal conflicts for you, so that you have a score sheet of what you've got to hit.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. When they write those personal conflicts, they're essentially asking for those things to be involved.
Right. And that's where the playbooks really shine for the storyteller, is you're kind of giving them a short list of a pick list.
Yeah.
Of what moves are going to push in that direction.
And that takes a lot of the legwork off the storyteller, the game master, sorry.
It really does. It really does. Like, devoted may receive orders they don't want to follow.
Mm-hmm. That's the central conflict.
Right. Or the chosen might see the consequences of denying their destiny. Like, that's huge.
Yeah.
Like,
they got some choices to make.
So, but it sets those balls in motion based upon what's on those sheets.
Mm-hmm.
But it also requires the PCs to very much follow their sheets.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they can't change playbooks. There's a whole thing about that.
Mm-hmm.
PCs who have become smitten or have basically given you a gift by signaling a part of the narrative they want to be focused on.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's the key to smitten is it can't be just used willy-nilly. You're literally pointing the story in a direction. And it's kind of beautiful.
Because it's a voluntary move.
Right.
You can't just be like, oh, you're smitten with this person. Well, okay, now I have to force myself to give a crap about them.
Yeah.
No, it's a voluntary move. You see an opportunity. You see an NPC do something that catches your eye, and you're like, oh, I am definitely smitten.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I can work with that.
Yeah.
You are smitten with this. I'm going to make a little note here. You are smitten with them. Cool. We're
Yeah.
going to loop back around to that.
Yeah. I go to Brock Sampson and a certain woman that he is very smitten with and can't do anything about, really.
Yep.
There are GM narrative moves, and there are GM mechanical moves. And because this game is primarily narrative, they want to give you as many assets to think about that. Highlighting an adversary's appeal, poking the dilemma, offering conditional love. I love that concept. Like a parent is a great way to bring conditional love into a situation.
Yep.
Love that their love earns them a new enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is a thing. It happens rather juvenilely, but does occur. Give them an ultimatum, or escalate the stakes of a conflict. Mm-hmm. Basically through an action. Mechanically, you have strings, just like a story. You get some right off the bat. For as many players as you have free, basically generic strings that rebirth every single session. So you always have strings.
Mm-hmm.
You get some through the game by use and stuff because they float toward you, but you don't just say like they get a string on you. It's the act that drives it. And I think that's where a challenge can kind of come in, is you have to be very creative to be able to say, okay, well, how am I going to pull a string on this person right now, right? Like I've disarmed them through this other action. I want to pull a string on them. Oh, got it. They're before me at sword tip waiting to die. Instead, I'm going to just lift their head with my finger. My blade is away. Uh-huh. Give them a look and walk away.
Yep.
Like, that's a pull of a string right there.
Yep.
What is it? That's a discussion between you and that player.
Was that a moment?
Right.
Was that just mercy?
Yep.
Did we almost kiss?
Yeah.
Wait, come back here.
Exactly. Like, I'm not done with you yet.
That's a string.
Yeah. Inflict a condition is obviously a thing, but you've got to figure out what makes sense for that, whether they're angry, whether they're tired, like all kinds of things.
Sure.
Make them stagger. That's a great moment. Staggering is is kind of an interesting check on its own, but it's because it's not a condition. It's a temporary thing that changes the state a little bit. Or offer them XP to make an unwise decision. I feel that this fits within the same as like using a string to get them to act in a certain way. But it kind of also...
That's old school fate. That's compel an aspect.
Correct.
Here's a fate token if you take a dive.
But the point is that you can do it even if you don't have strings to lay out, or if a string doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. You can still push that person in a direction to be like, hey, your character is very devoted. Why don't you make him a deal to get what you want? Ooh, I shouldn't make a deal with this person. Okay, you're devoted to your cause. Mm-hmm. Seems like a pretty simple way to get to that. So, the GM moves are also out there per playbook, so they can give you that direct turnaround, like we were talking about. Like the beast, you can describe the collateral damage that they cause.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Whether it's physical or otherwise.
If you've got a devoted in your party, present them with fanatics amongst allies and enemies alike.
Yeah, that is. I did that to one of the players in my game, my D&D game. I was like, I gave them fanatics.
Yep.
And devotees, and they were like, "Uh-oh."
That's actually a really great character from the Wheel of Time series. This guy named Masima, and he's when the savior or possible destructor of all mankind, the Dragon Reborn, is revealed. He becomes a huge devotee worshiper, and at first it's real cool because it's like, hey, you can get Masima to do all sorts of stuff because he's so devoted to the dragon. And then he starts doing all sorts of stuff, and you're like, hey, Masima, can you tone down the cultist energy just a little bit?
Yeah.
Hey, Masima, can you stop committing war crimes in the dragon's name? Just once. Just chill.
I didn't ask you to do this.
Yeah. And it
gets out of hand.
Small spoilers, but yeah, it comes to a head at a certain point where the dragon has to do something about it,
Yeah. There are examples of this in movies that I'm not going to get into because some of them get pretty creepy. The spooky witch judged their friends for associating with them. Trickster show them someone being vulnerable and suffering for it. Not them, someone else.
Someone else. Give them an example of what happens when you open up to people. Yeah. Nothing good ever comes from it. You should shut down entirely.
Yeah. And then a condition usually follows that one up.
But you're so lonely.
You're so lonely. But the thing we talked about earlier, when NPCs get conditioned, specifically formidable NPCs, their conditions may trigger something, which kind of makes sense. If they get anger, maybe they lash out and hurt a bystander. If they're frightened, maybe they force the PCs to choose between letting an NPC flee versus some other disaster. We often do that with... we talk about that with villains, where they're just like, what are you going to do? Stop the bomb or come get me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Guilty. Call out the PC's misdeeds. Don't know if that's ever been done. Hopeless. Offer a deal. Right?
Yeah.
Insecure. Escalate the violence to a new level. Meaning, maybe it goes from words to weapons. Maybe it goes from weapons to lethal intent. Maybe lethal intent goes to disregard for their own well-being or even collateral damage.
Yeah.
I love that line, that it's insecurity that drives that.
Mm-hmm.
This, I will flat out say, this section is fantastic for any game.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Remembering this right here, when your NPC is involved with other PCs, when they're at their moment, that you can do one of these.
Emotional manipulation 101. Within a narrative context.
Within the narrative context.
Within a narrative context, yes.
So, that being said, I kind of want to close the narrative of the gay master section with some stuff that I read, and I think this is very good. Jansen Parks, who's part of UK Tabletop Magazine, said, the biggest modification that PbtA Pocket System uses is the use of strings, tokens that represent emotional influence over another player. These are the fuel that keeps the romantic bonfire burning. And while the practicalities of this system can be a little fiddly, if you have a large cast of NPCs, you can end up with a mass of different tokens. And I could see that being a challenge. Mm-hmm. So keeping your NPC cast tight is helpful, but it also limits the drive of drama within the story. Mm-hmm. So understand that the tokens don't represent a direct link, meaning I give you this token and this is what this token means. Or it's tied to specifically only this momentary NPC. Right. It is over that NPC, but it's still a token that can be spent. Mm-hmm. That's the key there. The second is, I think it's, I'm going to try and get this right, Hegel Jort Langhout, I think is pronounced it properly.
Hilke?
Possibly.
Hilke Jorrit Langhout.
See, you're better at these than I am. Way better at these.
I am not dyslexic.
Yes, that. Thank you. But they're from Gaming, GAYMING magazine. Playing as the Game Master is a very different experience from other games that have Game Master, and needs to be comfortable running lots of NPCs that can be romantically appealing to other characters. There are guidelines for adjusting the rules to accommodate not playing with a lot of romance, but the default rules do assume that a large amount of flirting and romantic connection. So that's how we played it. It knows what game it wants, and it knows exactly what it wants from its players. And if my group wasn't a good fit for it, that's not the game's fault. Yeah. And I feel that is true for this game in many ways. You can play this game at a much lighter level than hard romance, but it removes a lot of the functionality of why. Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, understanding that concept about any system that is presented before you is that the game is meant to be played a certain way, and it is not the game's fault if it doesn't fulfill what your table needs, or likewise, if your table is unprepared for what it needs to fulfill.
Yeah, I agree.
It just isn't a good fit.
I think this dovetails very nicely into what we always close our system spotlights with, which is what it does well and what it doesn't do well.
Exactly.
And I think that's kind of a on both lists for me. Is that this game knows exactly what it is, and it is built to do exactly what it does.
Yeah.
And I was simultaneously in love with and disappointed by this game, because I think it's beautiful, and I'm really glad that it exists, but simultaneously I have to acknowledge that it's not a game I would play. It's just not the type of role-playing experience I'm looking for. I like a lot of emotional entanglement, but I don't like it to be the main focus. Like, while the cyberpunk dystopia is going on, I want to get involved with some NPCs, but I'm not looking for my involvement with the NPCs to be the main focus on a cyberpunk backdrop, you dig?
Right.
And that's, I feel like, what this game is offering. If that is what you're looking for, this is an amazing game. It was not what I personally was looking for.
Yeah. I feel that it sits in the same genre of if your table, primarily sitting around it, all really enjoy JRPGs and the interpersonal conflicts that they generate, you're probably going to like this game. You're probably going to get attached to it. It's all going to make sense, and the mechanics will be fantastic.
Yeah,
for
absolutely,
you.
absolutely.
On the
That's not to say that, like, I wasn't inspired by this game.
Oh, no.
I see flashes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I absolutely see She-Ra, Princess of Power in there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just, there's some really great stories that this could pull off amazingly well as the system that portrays it, you know?
Yeah, and I see every flavor of story that I've ever ran. Have been more of the backdrop to the connections with the characters in this. I even see your current game, your Savage Worlds game that we're currently playing in, having many comparable moments that this game would easily be mechanically able to help depict better.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got an amazing cast of characters that we've learned about and connected with, and we have these ties to that do emotional damage to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And emotional growth. If we didn't have the other dice to deal with of combat and discovery and intrigue, that's the game, right? It's just a different layer that we don't have to engage with. This game forces that.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, I'm going to kind of step away so I don't sit too hard on the negative. So what I think it does well, and as a narrative story is that it has amazing examples of the moves, the narrative weaving, how to use the Powered by the Apocalypse tools that exist, like clocks and pressure. It explains pacing exceptionally well, because that I think that could be challenging for storytellers who are trying to figure out a short campaign or a long campaign. They do a great job of even discussing like rogue dice, which is something that really doesn't come up much in Powered by the Apocalypse games discussions. But like the idea that like bad things happen in dice in narrative games, and you have to figure out how you're going to manage that. And like, yeah, XP for when things start falling down is fine, right? That's still recovery. That's still moving forward. Understanding influence using strings so you can change the dice a little bit, right? Or just the simple adding of consequences. The fact that you don't have hit points, that you're not just going to disappear, right? And they have probably one of the finest examples of short and long form. They have a 5-page stream of game where it's player and story.
Oh, yeah. No, I love that. Yeah.
Every role, every explanation, kind of, emotional feeling. It was like, this is great. It's like a live play that you can read.
Yeah.
Where it's normally that's broken out all through a book and you're finding little bits and pieces. This is just a straight up, like, here's a whole bunch of shit.
And to be fair, there is also other stuff broken out into the book, but this
right straight up in the DM section, like, here you go.
Here, we're going to show you how this game is played. Here's 5 pages of it.
I also love that your character retirement is happily ever after.
Yeah.
Like, that can be a thing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, due to the bury your gaze trope and the damage that the Hays Code and stuff like that did for so long, it's not a typical thing,
Yeah.
So many stories, especially trans stories, get the get a tragic ending.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to see a piece of queer media that is aimed at queer people that offers happily ever after as just an option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're thirsty sword lesbians, and yeah, there's swords involved here, man, but like, and then the sunset and we walk away holding hands.
Yeah, this isn't Thelma and Louise. This isn't And the Band Played On.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I know those stories. That was the truth between the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Give me a contemporary story, or give me 5 contemporary stories that sit within the LGBTQ that are in popular stream that end with a happy ending. You want an escape? This game is that escape. It is a good escape, and I applaud it for that. And I think more good escapes need to occur. We need to stop dying in a blaze of glory, right? It happens in too many games, Yes, cowboys can walk off into the sunset alone, and that's wonderful. But, like, whatever happened to settling down and having a coffee shop, right? And just having a good life with a cat.
Yeah.
And your partner.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
It's never just one cat.
It's never just one cat. It's always that damn orange cat. All right. Speaking of which, what doesn't Thirsty Sword Lesbians do?
Okay, so we had a pretty long discussion about how it's maybe not for everybody, you know. I don't think, I mean, it does say you don't have to be queer to play this game.
Correct.
But always be respectful, and I think that's correct. But I don't think it goes out of its way to welcome cisgender heterosexual people.
It does not.
In fact, it can seem pretty obtuse from that standpoint. And again, I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think it owes it to us. To you, honestly.
Yeah.
Because ostensibly, I am the target audience.
In many ways, you are. In many ways,
but
not all of them. But
you know, like you said, you compared it to Jiangxi, Blood in the Banquet Hall, and I think it's a great comparison. Where Jiangxi has a whole section basically saying this is a cultural exchange. You do not have to be Chinese. You do not have to be an immigrant to play this game, to understand this game. Understand you will be playing a character of Chinese descent, because that is literally what the game is.
And it recommends you play it with people of Chinese descent.
Exactly. But it goes out of its way to exchange culture. To say, we are sharing this with you so you can better understand our culture. Please play this with respect. Here are some guidelines on how to do so. And Thirsty Sword Lesbians does not have that section in it. It does not say, here is how to portray a queer person in a respectful way. And at the same time, though, I don't think it needs to, because it's okay that some things just are not made for you. But B, the broadness of experience in queer lives. I mean, I myself, I like to tout about how queer I am because I'm both trans and bi, right? I've got 2 letters of LGBT, not just one. Haha.
You do.
But man, I am as binary female as they come. I'm like a solid Kinsey 3. I conform to a lot of the typical expectations of femininity, of physical expression, etc., etc. Honestly, I'm pretty boring, and like that's even why when I transitioned, I chose the name Sara, because it was just a very plain, unembellished name. It was normal, and normalcy was what I was seeking, and in many ways, it's still what I am seeking. You know, I would like my life to be calm. I would like to die at 86 of boredom, asleep in my bed, you know? The world, unfortunately, isn't giving me that opportunity currently, but...
It's not painting that road.
Right, yeah, it's being a little more exciting than I wanted it to be, and unfortunately, you know, it's...
The road signs right now are telling you about things that are upcoming, and they're not what you want to see.
Yeah, it is radicalizing me quickly, but... But that said, though, you know... My life experience is not a lot of other people's life experiences, okay? I couldn't tell you what the life experience of being non-binary is, okay? I'm not exclusively lesbian. I'm not butch. I'm barely femme, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I can't tell you what weight these and idiosyncrasies, these labels come with. And that's just on the sapphic side of the queer spectrum, you know?
Yeah.
So to try to encapsulate all of that into some sort of a player's guide for cishet people of like, here's some do's and don'ts, would cheapen all of those identities. It would tokenize all of those identities, almost literally.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that is exactly how many view it. Like, and you even went so far as to look at some of the negative reviews about this game, where they were like, "This is a terrible game." You know, it marginalizes the game down to its sexuality.
Yeah,
because that's what they understand.
Because they view queer relationships as inherently sexual.
Because that's all they can view it as. They have no reference point.
Right.
It's not a discussion.
Yeah.
Right? Everything comes down to that.
This is about girls kissing? Of course this is sexual. Like,
yeah.
No, not really. Like,
that's like viewing everything in Japanese culture through the lens of the samurai.
Right.
Yes, that is one lens, but it is not even remotely accurate.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's like saying that every time every heterosexual person kisses, it's inherently sexual. No, sometimes there's kisses of love, there's kisses of friendship, there's kisses of desire. There's a whole spectrum between love and lust and you know, and intimacy that a single kiss can encapsulate.
Wait till next show. We're going to get into a long discussion about uncoupling the word love.
But you're going to boil down a game about two girls kissing as inherently sexual, and that's just not great.
And I think... I mean,
he thinks right. There's the kiss of death. Where's that in here? We've got swords. We're not just lesbians. We're also sword wielders.
That's true. That is very true. Yeah, I'm not going to go back over what I said at the opening because I am not the target of this game.
Mm-hmm.
I am not this. And the only point that I will come back to, and I went back scrolling and I realized the key that was told to us. That I overlooked until the moment that I said it, and I knew I wanted to come back to it, and that was in the section about the laws of the table, the last thing they put in there is not to demand anyone educate you about their marginalizations.
Yeah. Yeah.
That should have been in bold and highlighted. That is the truth of the book. It is not here to let me ask you questions about how I should be running this on those marginalizations.
Mm-hmm.
That's for me to figure out. So I'm not saying that in a negative context. I'm saying that the book is doing what it was meant to do. That this game is doing what it was meant to do. It was not meant to be run by someone by picking it up off the shelf and saying, hey, let's do this cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
And have us all be, token flaming and gay and fucking around. I'm not saying that isn't a way to get into this and then find out that you're in an emotional roller coaster of death. Sure. Why not? You're gonna be in trouble.
Might awaken something in you. You don't know.
And I dare say it probably would.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, this game does not set up the safety net either, as far as like what you're gonna run into, because the distance between player and character, because you're dealing with emotional connection points.
Because it is all emotional, and it is emotional forward.
That is the dangerous line, and that's one of the things that I think it does not do well, is help you understand the exit strategy of bleed.
Yep.
Nowhere in here that I could find in any level of bold text was anything that said, if you have an emotional breakdown at your game because of discovery, here's the suicide hotline number.
Yeah.
Here are other contact numbers when the person at your table who you didn't know was queer suddenly just felt like they were outed.
Mm-hmm.
Or discovered. And now they're terrified.
Yeah.
Like, that is the cis entry point of concern that I would have with this game. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't explore it, but I am saying don't explore it with a random group of people.
Yep, agreed.
You do not know what you're getting into. And number 2, storytellers, if you're going to crack this book, be prepared. Mm-hmm. You're going to be playing a lot of hats. And like any good person who's ever stepped into theater, and I will say this, as a cis het person who stepped into theater and sang a line to another girl on stage, and immediately following that got asked, "Are you two a couple?" Multiply that feeling by 1,000.
Yep.
When you play 5 different NPCs in the game, one who's gay, one who's bi, one who's lesbian, one who's just queer, and one who doesn't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
And have your table look at you a little oddly of like, how are you that in touch with my connections?
Yep.
So...
You're not wrong.
There is a minefield here if you are not in a group, and I'm going to put one other caveat to this that maybe it's just me.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a game for an audience. A live audience, like your girlfriend decides to come and watch the game. You don't want side commentary at a game like this.
I'm gonna disagree. I'm gonna disagree just simply because I think there is a whole side of the discussion we're having now.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not saying anything we've said has been invalid.
Fair.
Taking everything we just said as valid criticisms of the emotional weight and impact
Correct.
and possible consequences.
Correct.
I think it's also possible that we're taking things too seriously. And I think having a light game of She-Ra, Princess of Power, where we're bouncing around shooting friggin' rainbows out of our swords at the robot invasion from outer space, as we defend the lands of Eternia from the back of a talking unicorn, is A-okay. I think this system runs that perfectly, and I think if you don't get in too deep into the... You can get into the emotional stuff. The emotional stuff is very forward, but that doesn't also mean that this is going to be ugly cry at therapy game every single time.
Right. And that's what I agree with. I agree with that statement in the sense that the deeper you go, the more you have to understand all of the tools that are involved in the process. And honestly, that's true for any game that has depth.
And that's why you have things like the check-in and the X card. If
100%.
somebody does feel like they're in over their head, there are safety tools that are placed very forward in this game system to allow you a ripcord.
Yes. Also, on a lighter note, don't go into this expecting that they're going to hand you a fully fleshed out setting with everything that you need to just hit the ground running with step-by-step adventuring. This is not adventuring.
Yeah.
This is a meld of the story connecting with the characters.
If you want to play the cishet version of this, play Monster Hearts. It's basically the same setup.
Yes.
But it's monsters in high school instead of a bunch of queers doing whatever a bunch of queers do.
Yep.
So,
I'm going to step right out of this and into the first question because I think it's a great exit point. But
I'm going to put one cap on this before we do this.
I apologize.
There's a comment that Knox in the Box made that is hilarious, and I've been trying to find a place to appropriately slip into the discussion, and I can't find one. He said, LGBT that's why all the colored heads.
I have no commentary.
It's perfect. 10 out of 10. I have no notes.
Yeah, that's accurate. Excellent. It is accurate.
All right, that needed to be shared with the world. First question. First and only question.
Yeah. Which intrigues me, but because number of people who commented that they were interested in this.
Sure.
But at the same time, didn't want to ask questions.
Right.
Maybe we'll get some for next week. You can always come back. Remember, if you do have questions for us about a system that we've done a spotlight on, feel free to throw the questions in for the next show. We'd love it. That'd be great. But anyways, Nevin's got this question. What elements from Thirsty Sword Lesbians could be taken out into other games? Honestly, several. But one of the ones like I had talked about earlier, which I think you could directly pull right out, is the formidable NPC triggers. I think that as a chart for you just to keep off to the side, that when you're in either a combat-heavy game or even a narrative combat game, or just a situation where you've got an NPC that you're not necessarily sure what's going on, you can quickly check that chart as is this person now angry?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this person now frightened? Is this person now guilty or hopeless or insecure? And have a response that's right there for you to kind of go, oh yeah, I could do that. I think that helps make your NPCs, again, more lifelike by giving you a response that maybe you weren't prepared for mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Because we often say, the NPCs meet with this villain and then, 3-shot him, right? Well, you can always do a pause in there and have a move. Okay, yes, you could have them make a move that, they twirl their mustache and get away. But why not have that have an emotional connection?
Mm-hmm.
Why not have them get frightened? And in that frightened moment, make the PCs make a choice,
Mm-hmm.
right? Between them and or saving themselves or someone else, right? That those kinds of moments create way better tension than the deceiving moment of, oh, I got away.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that right there is, I think, one of the coolest things. Like, I love the moments when you think you have a villain, and that villain, like, starts to go over the edge and instead throws out, like, a hook that grabs the foot of one of the heroes that is weak. Mm-hmm. And starts dragging them over the edge with them.
Yeah, yeah.
And now they're hanging there off of the friend who's just about to go over the edge with them, and you have to make the decision. Like, you can't reach the tether to cut that person free, but you've got a hand on your friend. And you're making that longing decision of how you're going to get through that situation.
The one I've always loved is not lobbing a physical grenade, but an emotional grenade.
Sure.
So one of the big reasons why I love the Buffy musical episode so much.
Oh, okay.
Because that episode is one gigantic emotional grenade.
Yeah.
The premise being that the villain makes you sing about the things that are deepest in your heart, i.e. the secrets you've been keeping from everyone.
Yeah.
The things you really feel that you haven't talked to them about. And at the end of the episode, everyone has sung a song in front of their other friends and revealed that they're insecure, they're frightened, they don't love the other person as much as they profess to, that, all sorts of stuff. Mm-hmm. And the villain delivers the line, all these secrets you've been concealing, say you're happy now, once more with feeling.
Yeah.
And everybody just kind of realizes, oh, yeah, he literally walks off.
Yeah.
At that point, he just goes back to whatever nether realm he's from, but he wins. That's how he wins, because everybody is standing there going, oh, I don't feel so good about any of this anymore.
Right.
And now all of my friendships are in doubt.
I go to the now famous Star Trek episode where they're all singing. Mm-hmm. And there is a lot that's uncovered in that and opens up all kinds of lines of story.
Yeah, I watched that episode of Strange New Worlds, and
beautiful.
Ask Heatsink. That's what I was saying through the entire thing. Was like, this is once more with feeling in space.
Is. But it's not just once more with feeling, but it's also exploring it, because some of it is in private, mm-hmm. and in that sense, those people are now uncovering the truths that they were hiding from themselves.
Sure, absolutely.
And
you can hide stuff from yourself. It's just as emotionally impactful, yeah.
But what it also does is it gave the writers a moment to basically just expose.
Yeah, sure.
Here's this. We're going to end this thing here, but the rest of this is just going to carry on. Mm-hmm. So
what if your villain, instead of, like I said, you said throwing out your grappling hook and being
right.
like, I'm going to rip you off the edge with me, just being like, all right, you've beaten me this time, heroes. But how good are you going to feel about it when, so-and-so finds out that you've been cheating on her with the cleric?
Right.
Ta!
Yeah.
What do you mean you've been cheating on me with the cleric? Nothing.
Baby, it means nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. Nothing. He's the villain. You can't believe him. This explains where you've been all those times.
Yep.
Baby, no!
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the hard part about doing those kind of grenades is you've got to have information.
Oh, sure.
And that's where this game shines in that sense.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's nothing to say that you couldn't do things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't force pauses. I think stagger is great.
Mm-hmm.
I think the idea of staggering someone, basically just taking the moment that you've emotionally hit them in a way that it throws them off. They can't make their next action, not because they're not physically able, not because they're not skilled enough to do it, but because literally what just was thrown at them was emotional. And now they have to kind of take a minute to figure out how to handle that, right? That mechanic, that simple mechanic, I think would radically change a lot of games.
Yeah, I agree.
The idea that a villain instead of having like in D&D having like a room rule or like a something, you know, a layer action or even a villain action that can drop in at any time, just has the ability to stagger you with a comment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, you can't take an action. Why? You're staggered emotionally. Tell me what he said to you.
Huh.
It's like, wait, you're not going to tell me? No, you're going to tell me what he said that emotionally staggered you. What would really, what in this moment would bother you most? That would stop you for just a minute and make you think instead of taking the next strike with your sword. I'm not good enough. Maybe you're not good enough to take him out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really think you could kill me? You came all this way, and you really think you can take me? God, you are bold.
Right.
Like, okay, you're staggered. Great.
Yep.
Next.
Yep.
Like, you know, and that's the whole thing is that simple act takes it away from the combat and brings it back to the person.
Yeah, yeah.
And their connection with whatever's going on. And I love that. Sometimes you're just not capable of it, but I think a stagger is a great piece to be able to do that.
I really like strings, and I don't think that strings are that ingrained in the Powered by the Apocalypse system that they can't be easily lifted and supplanted into whatever other game system you're playing.
Okay.
I think they make for just a real great like marker system, you know, even if
Sure.
you're not doing them as like deep emotional, you know, bonds or anything like that, but just doing them as, hey, you owe me a favor. I have a string on you, you know.
Right.
We did that thing that one time and you still owe me for it.
Yeah.
Seeing those in like a cyberpunk game, I could see very easily. You know?
Yeah, it is a lot of the same kind of currency that gets spent with like reputation,
sure,
and stuff like that. But it genericizes it to the point where it could be emotional.
Yeah, it's very interpersonal at that point. You know,
yeah.
Reputation, I think, says a lot about who you are in the grand picture.
Yes.
Whereas strings, I think, they're very intimate.
Like
you know,
you are making a connection with someone,
right?
And in that connection, that is making a difference, and that connection doesn't have to be that instant connection doesn't have to be something so much as you're reaching out to them, but so much as you touching them in a way.
Yeah, I mean, like I've been playing through Cyberpunk 2077 lately,
yeah.
And like I think there's a lot of really great examples of that, especially with like Johnny Silverhand's old crew and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There is a point in the story where you get to kind of see part of Johnny's story, and he goes to recruit into his crew one of his old flames, Rogue,
mm-hmm.
and he walks in and she's like, I should shoot you where you stand. Like I don't want to hear a word out of your mouth. The answer is no. Turn around and leave.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, come on, Rogue, it's me. Come on, we did that thing together. All right, at least hear me out. And plus, this is the other person involved. We got to go rescue her. And I was like, oh, crap. She's involved? Yes. That's a string. That's just a string. I have a string on Rogue. She's going to say yes to my request. She's not going to like it. She's going to feel compelled. She's going to feel put upon. She's going to feel manipulated when I do this. But she will agree. Because I have a string on her.
Hey, Sarah. We dug coal.
We dug coal together. Yes. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Boyd Crowder gets away with what he does in Justified because he has a string on Raylan.
And Raylan gets away with it at the end, proving that someone is gone. He goes, how could I possibly believe you? We dug coal together.
Yep.
He manipulates him with it.
Yep.
100%.
Yep.
I loved that. I
Yep.
loved that it was turned at the end, and I think it was a beautiful way of displaying that.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think it can come off in a totally different direction, in the sense of like Wreck-It Ralph.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite Fixes Felix is dealing with the is at one point with I can't remember her name, the commando lady.
Jane Lynch.
Jane Lynch. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, and he calls her a dynamite gal, and suddenly she has this huge flashback.
She has this PTSD flashback right in front of us. It's amazing.
And it's that simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, like, I'm gonna pull a string on her by calling her a dynamite gal. Oh man, you okay?
Ooh, okay.
Okay.
You want to uncork that particular powder keg? You go right ahead.
But at the same time, I look at that and like that could have just been a guard.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're hitting at him and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna pull a string on this guard. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna point past him toward what I'm looking at, and as he turns his head, I'm just gonna bring my hand back and graze the edge of his chin to draw his face back toward mine.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy.
But Sergeant Calhoun, thank you, Knox.
Thank you, Knox. I appreciate that. But like again, this game evokes reminders of where these things can be used, and it's through all media.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of emotion that can be put out there, and it does a good job of referencing that through all of its functional mechanics. So I'm not saying that any of the mechanics aren't that portable.
Yeah, really.
You can I mean, that's the beauty of Powered by the Apocalypse, is it's narrative that sits on top.
Yeah. Yep.
So if you need it, it's there for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the beauty of Powered by the Apocalypse.
It's very fiction first, and the rules are just kind of there to support the fiction. So they're very light. They float, you know?
Yeah, there's nothing to say that you couldn't just grab this whole system and just kind of drop it on lightly on top of Fate, or drop it on top of Cortex, or drop it on top of something else.
Sure.
Where you need emotional connections and more personal than grand social.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
all right,
yes, there's a lot.
Let's wrap this up here.
All right, let's put a bow and say, next episode, we are talking about
relationships.
Yes, and this is where I earlier flagged on the fact that like love comes in many shades.
Yeah,
and that's the whole idea is that you don't have to use the capital L romance love angle. There is many grades of that, and those grades come out in different ways. And so next episode, we'll talk about, like, envy and attraction.
Sure.
And how they can infiltrate your game in ways that are predictable and can be presented in really good context in the narrative.
Yeah, I think for especially for a lot of people, like the whole concept of like, oh, the bard the bard seduces everyone is like the closest they get to role playing relationships in games, and so we just want to kind of deep dive that one and just really kind of say how else that could turn out for you, you know.
Also, that like family love is a thing.
Yep,
and that's okay.
Exactly.
Also is family hate, but we'll get to that as well.
All right. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join us up on our Discord. We'd love to hear from you there. Shoot us some questions, and you can find that link on our Twitter as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members who help us out every single month, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Subjet, the Arcane Asylum Veteran, Hulu, Sam, Sean, and Sparkle Motion. We appreciate all your support. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find them on Instagram or on Patreon or on YouTube Music at Arcane Anthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find them at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on YouTube Music. And our outro music is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find them at freemusicarchive.org.
And a big shout out as always to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us. All of our families who've shared, friends who've shared us all these great stories to share with you over the years, and you, every single one of our listeners. We love you guys so much.
Love you
Good
guys.
night.
Good night.